A new city council year and eyes on a new budget in Jacksonville. Today, we have the brand new council president laying out his plans for the next 12 months and reacting to concerns about public safety and affordable housing. Federal lawmakers have concerns about the war in Ukraine. Well, what about the impact on immigration? We'll ask Congresswoman Cammack and get her view on the changes to abortion law in America. Plus, Florida's U.S. Senator for nearly a dozen years, Rubio, analyzes trouble in the economy and national security on This Week in Jacksonville. Glad you're here with us today. It was notable in the past 12 months when Jacksonville City Council was led by two men of color. President Sam Newby, he was our guest last week on the show, and the vice president is now the president. Joining us in studio right now, Terrance Freeman. Appreciate being here. I saw some coverage we did of the investiture, or when you were anointed, if you will, president. That looked like it was very emotional. Tell me how you're feeling about that and what's different about Terrance Freeman being president versus Sam Newby.
Well, Ken, thank you so much for having me. And that night wasn't an emotional night. Seeing my daughters out there leading the pledge, their fourth time doing so, I found it hard to hold the tears back. Yeah. And they definitely flowed. And the fact that they got to represent their own personalities with their shoes was amazing. But looking out in that audience and seeing such a diverse crowd, seeing the performers on the during the installation being kids from various organizations throughout our community, from various backgrounds in life and various backgrounds from neighborhoods, get out and flourish and show their talents. It was just an awesome feeling. I think it was great for Jacksonville, and now I'm excited about my time as president.
Yeah. So one of the things that I know is going to be important to you, you said there's some things. Certainly, we're hearing about the budget this week. We can talk about that. But this week we learned some of the details on how Mayor Curry wants to spend millions of tax dollars in the coming year. It appears the city's going to have more cash for various projects. In fact, about $100 million more. So talk to me a little bit about how you would like to see some of that excess cash.
Yes, we're definitely in a good time in our city right now when it comes to having the resources to do some things that really can set the stage for a lot of success moving forward. For me, tops on my list is workforce development. Workforce development is one of those things to where we have to start training our workforce today for the jobs of tomorrow. And we know that with the growth coming, I mean, the secret's out. Jacksonville is a destination, and we're going to continue to recruit companies to come here, and it's imperative that we have groups ready. And so I really love the work that our council's done, and I played a small role in that with our JSEB program, Jacksonville Small Emerging Businesses, where we're really utilizing innovation to capitalize on the 80,000 plus small businesses that we have in Jacksonville and really helping capture them so that they can be a part of this process and ready to go out into the workforce when these jobs come.
And I'm very familiar with what Jacksonville Chamber of Commerce, Jack's Chamber, has an entrepreneurial growth division. They're not the only organization that's focusing on that, but you're saying that's kind of a key to workforce development.
No, absolutely. And for me, I want Jacksonville to be known as the apprenticeship capital. And by that, we're going to have to be intentional and focusing in some incentives and dollars from those incentives that lead back into a trust fund for these jobs. And what we're looking at is with this initiative that I'm looking to lead, partnering with organizations like our JSEB program or with other city authorities or even our trade industries. I think of Northeast Florida Builders. I think of the Electrical Alliance. I think of Career Source Northeast Florida, FSCJ. They're doing an amazing work. Partnering with them to really bring awareness out and to really make sure that we are pumping out talent into the workforce.
Beneficial for them to make that partnership happen as well. You mentioned affordable housing. I want to show you this week Mayor Lenny Curry launched the Jacksonville Community Land Trust. This is touted as one of the solutions to affordable housing on that issue. So the Land Trust aimed at helping neighborhoods resist gentrification. Said, hey, they're going to provide community members with a meaningful voice in development and then enable low and moderate income households to build generational wealth. So President Freeman, how important is this effort and this topic to you?
One, I want to commend the mayor and administration for taking that bold step of leadership and initiating a program like this. Someone shared with me that a 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment in Jacksonville, Florida is about $1,700 a month. When you break that down, that's $24 an hour. I know that we're going to be leaving some good folks out of this conversation, and we can do better as a city. So I want to lead an initiative, and it's going to be one of the special committees that we're charging that's going to take a look at behavioral health, it's going to take a look at homelessness, and it's going to take a look at affordable housing and the various ways that we can partner through public-private partnerships with our local partners, with community leaders, to bring forth opportunities and options that lead to pathways for home ownership, affordable home ownership. Yeah. And for affordable housing.
It's interesting as you see growth in different areas, whether that's the explosion of growth in St. Johns County or growing in different places in Northeast Florida. Many times you'll have homeowners say, oh, I don't want affordable housing near me. Well, you've got to have something affordable for the other people who are going to provide services in your neighborhood. Instead of having them drive 30 or 40 miles to provide, it's got to be integrated everywhere, right?
Yes, and I'll say that that's been my biggest thing is unity. One of the takeaways that I had when I first moved to Jacksonville is that Jacksonville is a city where we love our city, but we love each other as well. And we do have some tense moments that come at times, but when it comes down to it, we have each other's back. And we know that right now there are portions of our community that are hoping and longing for that American dream. And we're living in some good times, but those good times are bringing in some challenges where house ownership is not necessarily a realistic goal or attainable goal for an individual. This is one way we can help.
As they say, hope is not a strategy. So you're looking for ways that you can implement that.
Yes,
we've only got about a minute left, but I know that you wanted to talk public safety a little bit. 5 candidates become the next sheriff, 4 Democrats, 1 Republican, all of them people of color. How does that factor into new leadership, and what does your hope for improving public safety in Duval County?
Well, public safety has been my #1 priority and will continue to be. And as you saw in the proposal of the mayor's budget, it is a focus of his as well, and we're pleased with that. And my colleagues and I, we can't wait to get the budget and to look further into it. But we have to have a strong partnership between JSO, our community leaders, and our community groups. Collectively, we know that resolving crime is not going to happen in a silo. It's going to take us collectively coming together. And another initiative that I'm looking to do is to partner with our Crime and Safety Task Force and have them do a program or operate a program where we're partnering with local nonprofits, groups within the communities. We're going to hire students that are going to be software developers, and they're going to be working in training to give us real-time data so that we can look at the issues and the crime that we're facing in real time and assess what we're doing. Because throwing money at the problem is just not going to solve it. We have to all roll our sleeves up and get engaged and get involved.
Yeah, this sounds like that, not just reacting, but being proactive.
Yes, sir.
And President Freeman, I appreciate it. Congratulations, and I look forward to hearing more from you throughout this year.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, stay with us. We got another elected lawmaker coming up, this time making points about the nation's state of affairs. Senator Marco Rubio, next on This Week in Jacksonville.
You're watching This Week in Jacksonville with Kent Justice.
Republican Marco Rubio first won election to the U.S. Senate in 2010, then earned re-election after running for president, but withdrawing in 2016. In the past few weeks, I spoke with Senator Rubio about a variety of topics, including the tough year so far in America financially.
It's going to get worse, unfortunately, because we're going to have a major supply chain disruption coming out of Shanghai. China's been shut down because they've had this catastrophe with COVID over there. Look, it's a combination of things. I think number one is that, but it really comes down to the very basics that we learn in economics of supply and demand. We've had a shortage of supply because of COVID disruptions, in the case of oil and gas because of a war, and also because of domestic decisions that have been made by this administration, and an increase in supply, particularly when you pump a bunch of money into the economy, like $1.9 trillion, the way Biden did last March when the Democrats passed that bill. So it's very simple. If you have less supply and more demand, the prices go up dramatically. And that's what we're seeing across the board. Number one is fuel prices, right? Because if fuel prices go up on jet fuel, on diesel, on everything, the price of everything else goes up. Everything's transported using those fuels. And there, the supply has been made worse by the decisions of this administration to wage war against fossil fuels. They're telling banks not to lend money to oil exploration deals. And who's going to go into that business today when you have an administration that's openly hostile to it? Meanwhile, they pumped $1.9 trillion and really would have pumped $3 or $4 trillion into the economy had it not been for Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. So the administration has made inflation worse, and they really don't have any answer for how to get us out of it. And now what you worry about is deflation. Now what you worry about, frankly, is stagnation and a potential recession.
Is that part of what we're seeing in the stock market? Clearly, it's been a rough 2022 when you look at that broad picture.
Well, there's two things happening with the stock market. The first is that once inflation begins to climb this high, they have to raise interest rates to slow down the economy. And that's a very blunt tool. When you raise interest rates, it makes more sense to put your money in interest-bearing accounts and less sense to keep it at risk in the stock market. So that's number one. Number two is a lot of these companies around there are beginning to underperform. They're beginning to underperform because of inflation. There comes a point where the prices for them and the costs are too high. Maybe they don't even have supply to make sales. And so they can only raise prices to a certain point. They're also, if you're an airline, as an example, your fuel prices are very high and the future for travel is uncertain. So I think that's what you're seeing with the stock market. I don't judge the health of our economy by the stock market, but it is a factor in our economy because there are a lot of people at retirement or nearing retirement who are going to depend on the stock market for their retirement income. And that's unfortunately when taking a big hit right now, and it's going to hurt a lot of people who are planning to retire or are retired.
When we've talked national security in the past, we've talked about border security. How do you feel about what's happened even recently at the southern border? Because the Biden administration had removed some policy, and now that's back in effect because of a court order.
It could be gone at any time. All they need is for a judge to say that it's okay to take it away. First of all, I think it exposes hypocrisy. I pointed it out last week in a hearing. I asked Fauci about this. If you're an American citizen who's going to travel abroad this summer to any country in the world, in order for you to come back to your own country, an American citizen, you have to take the COVID test to enter the United States. On the other hand, if you come here illegally, you don't have to take a COVID test to enter the United States. But bigger than that is there is no border security. The fact of the matter is, if you cross illegally the U.S.-Mexico border, present yourself to border authorities and say the magic words that trigger asylum, your chances of remaining in the United States pending a hearing 3 or 4 years from now that you probably won't show up for are extremely high. And people know that. So more people are coming. Now, there are still people being removed because of Title 42. If you take away Title 42, over 90% of the people who cross the border will be able to stay. That's the plan the Biden administration has. Word has gotten out. And so we have hundreds of thousands of people headed here or poised to enter less than a day away from the border, just waiting for that order to be lifted to cross the border. I think we're going to have a very tough summer. It's already a border that's been overrun because of the Biden administration. They've incentivized this, they've encouraged it, and frankly, they're inviting people to do this.
I saw this week that you had earned an endorsement from the Florida Police Benevolent Association. This seems like an area where a former law enforcement chief of police, Val Demings, would get those kind of endorsements instead. Why do you feel like you're getting law enforcement support?
Well, first of all, I have almost every sheriff in Florida has endorsed me. The Florida Sheriff's Association, the Florida Police Chiefs have endorsed me, and now the largest police union have endorsed me. And it's pretty simple. I've always been on the side of law enforcement. And what's worse for them is that Val Demings was a police chief. She was a police officer. She should know better. And in 2020, when she wanted to be picked as Joe Biden's vice president, she was out there actively campaigning for vice president. She wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post, basically chastising law enforcement. She had interviews on television talking about how systemic racism was deeply embedded in police departments across the country. She called the Minneapolis effort to defund the police a very thoughtful proposal. She did all that because she wanted to be picked as the vice president, and her party is controlled by radical leftists, and she wanted to fit in. So for someone from law enforcement to use the supposed credibility that your service in law enforcement gives you, as is the case with Val Demings, to use that platform to attack law enforcement the way she did, it's even worse than someone who doesn't even have that background and believes in these crazy things. So they know that if she ever made it to the Senate, she would not be on their side. She would do whatever the left tells her to do. I have a history and a record of supporting law enforcement. And that's why not only do I have all those endorsements, but I think you'll continue to see these strong law enforcement endorsements.
Senator, you just said, seemingly saying it's a negative that Congresswoman Demings votes with her party. Don't you vote with Republican Party leadership?
Sure. But I voted, she's voted with Pelosi 100% of the time. I haven't voted with McConnell 100% of the time. There's been times when I voted differently from what the preferred position of President Trump was in that regard. But see, I'm in a party that allows you to do that. She's in a party that doesn't. In the Democratic Party, it doesn't matter what you personally believe, you have to follow the line of the most radical elements in that party. And if you don't, then they come after you like they've done Kirsten Sinema in Arizona, like they've tried to do to Joe Manchin, and they try to demonize and destroy you. In my party, we have people that vote differently all the time. And we move on to the next issue because we allow for those differences of opinion. So she's voted with Pelosi 100% of the time, and she gets to the Senate, she'll vote with Schumer 100% of the time. It doesn't matter what she believes. Whatever he tells her she needs to do, that's what she's going to fall in line and do, because that's what her record has been.
Well, Senator Rubio told me that he believes Roe versus Wade was bad law, that there's no constitutional right to an abortion. Mr. Rubio spoke to us in response to an interview we did with Representative Val Demings. Demings running for Senate, and she is the favorite in the Democratic primary taking place next month. You can see my interview with Demings online. Search news4jax.com with the keywords This Week in Jacksonville and Val Demings. All right, next on This Week in Jacksonville, the youngest congresswoman elected to the House in 2020, Representative Cammack, explains her very personal and passionate feelings about the new rules concerning abortion. Stay with us.
You're watching This Week in Jacksonville on Channel 4.
And in this segment, U.S. Representative Cammack joins us. She's a first-term congresswoman, Republican, outspoken on conservative issues, and an issue very personal to her was addressed by the recent Supreme Court ruling on abortion. Representative Cammack joining us by Zoom. Congresswoman, you're co-chair of the Pro-Life Caucus. Explain why you support the ruling that overturns Roe versus Wade.
Well, it's good to see you, Kent. And yes, it is so incredible to not only serve as the youngest Republican woman in Congress today in the country, but also to serve as the co-chair of the Pro-Life Caucus. I've said often that I firmly believe as a millennial that I am part of the post-Roe generation, and that ruling that we saw here in the last few weeks solidified that. This was such a win for the sanctity of life, but I also like to say that it was a win for the sanctity of our Constitution. Because as we have seen back and forth, and even within the ruling itself, as you read into the depth of the justices' decisions, the dissenting judges couldn't really come out of their own pretzel logic. They kept circling around opinions and culture, but really couldn't nail in the Constitution where an abortion was a guaranteed right. And so this issue returns to the states, and Dobbs v. Jackson is marked as a win in the pro-life and sanctity of life category. And for me, I think this is such a big deal for me personally, having a very personal pro-life story where my mom was urged to abort me because doctors warned her she wouldn't be able to carry me to term. She had had a stroke when she was pregnant with my sister years prior. And so the only option for her, according to the doctors, was abortion. But she was an incredibly stubborn and bull-nosed lady who at that time was not going to take it. And she to this day is still so proud of that moment where she fought for life. And so I'm here today to not only share my story, but share the fact that this ruling is really a reflection of the law catching up to the science. We know that this is not some clump of cells in the womb. This is an individual with its own DNA, and we are fighting for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but it starts with life.
And Congresswoman, clearly, as you pointed out, it goes back to the states. The state of Florida has enacted a new rule that's going to be fought in the courts a little bit about no abortions allowed after 15 weeks. Let's move on to another issue, though, and I appreciate you sharing especially the personal component of that story and your view on that topic. Only 2 Republicans participating in the January 6th committee hearings that we've seen last month and now into this month. Many people feel it's partisan and political, but more than 840 people from almost all 50 states have been arrested as a result of that riot January 6th, a year and a half ago. Florida, the most people facing charges with 94. So help us understand your perspective. Do you want to know why that riot happened? And for the committee's focus, do you want to know if the president was behind it in order to try and stay in office?
Well, I think as someone who was there that day, just 3 days after taking my oath of office on the House floor, not a single person in this country wants to return and relive those horrible moments that we all collectively faced. We all want to get to the truth of the matter, but this so-called January 6th committee is not it. It's a sham committee, and that's evidenced by the fact that, one, in 232 years, we have always had a bipartisan effort when it comes to these select committees. And this is the first time in 232 years that the Speaker of the House has denied the minority representation on these committees of our choosing. Instead, she handpicked Republicans that would go along with her narrative. And let us not forget, of course, that Nancy Pelosi has rescinded and blocked all requests for her emails, phone calls, and texts from that day, the day after, and the days leading up to January 6th. If you are truly going forward for the truth and seeking truth, wouldn't all communications be on the table? One would assume so, but that's not really the case. And of course, we know that through the Senate investigation, all of the security recommendations that have been put forward, not a single one has been implemented. So is this more of a political outcome that they are chasing? It seems so, because they talk about security, yet not a single security upgrade has been made to date, despite the fact that there has been millions of dollars appropriated for it. So I think that this is a sham committee. This is clearly just politics as usual, trying to paint the former president in a bad light. And really, it's a shame. And it is a sad day in America when people are denied due process. And I think that we're going to see a lot more to come on this. But this committee is nothing but a sham and not interested in the truth.
And not trying to dispute you, there are 2 Republicans who are part of that, but I understand what you're saying. The Speaker, the Minority Leader, Leader McCarthy, had said, hey, we want these specific people part of the committee. That didn't happen. I know there are other issues we want to talk through. We're running out of time, however. Congresswoman, thank you so much. I know we haven't seen each other in person in a couple of years. We'd love to have you back in studio sometime soon.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Kent. Have a good one.
Thank you so much. All right, so appreciate you being here with us today. What's ahead on our show? Well, each of the 5 candidates for Jacksonville Sheriff, they are planning to join us in the next few weeks, starting with Wayne Clark and TK Waters. This Week in Jacksonville airs each Sunday morning at this time. I'm Kent Justice. Thanks for watching on air on Channel 4 and the CW17. And then you can find us online at news4jax.com or streaming on News4Jax Plus.
See why every day more people are choosing News 4 Jax, Northeast Florida and South Georgia's #1 source for local news.